So we're back with Tuesday of the excellent podcast, The Elephant Lounge. It can be found on Podbeam and YouTube. I'll put the link in the description. So you had an excellent point. The number one point made about Michael Jackson is that he didn't have a childhood. So all these accusations of pedophilia are wrong. It's just that Michael Jackson was eccentric and didn't have a childhood. What's your response?
He didn't have a childhood. Well, he had a never-ending childhood, or he tried to. No, he did not have a positive or healthy view of what a childhood was, because a healthy childhood would not include an amusement park, a movie theater, candy at all hours of the night, no strict diet, no school. There's nothing that you could consider that to be a normal, healthy childhood. And the other problem with, okay, he's sleeping in bed with these boys. Look, I've said it before. I will say it again. I had many boy or male friends as a child growing up. My best friend was male. I would stay at his house all the time, not in his room, not in his bed. I'd sleep out in the living room or whatever. I was very, very close with this family, by the way. And he would have his male friends stay the night with him as well. They did not sleep in beds together. That never happened. They didn't cuddle, and they certainly didn't sit on each other's lap and say rubba rubba.
Yeah, I mean, how long is someone's childhood? Too, I mean, a great point. What you can say, it ends at maybe 18 years. This childhood keeps on going. It's never.
Right.
I mean, when do you get your fill of reliving your childhood? And the idea of Neverland is that it goes on forever, right?
Right, and you can't relive your childhood. I think one of the best
Hold on.
Symbolism.
Okay.
So you can't relive your childhood. Like, the best example I have been able to find that I think is brilliant. Have you ever seen the movie Dickie Roberts?
No.
Former childhood star. It is an excellent movie with David Spade, and he plays this character that was a child star, right? And he grows up, and he loses his identity and all this other stuff, and he goes to Rob Reiner. He plays himself in the movie, and he wants to cast somebody in his new movie. And he says, look, Dickie, you never had a childhood. This guy that I'm casting for, he's an average guy. So David Spade gets it in his head, Dickie Roberts, okay, he gets it in his head, he's going to relive his childhood. And what does he do? He takes the money that he gets from this book advance and he pays a family to host him and to play as a child. But the family that he chose was what he perceived was a healthy, mom and dad situation, 2 kids and a dog. That's what you would do if you want to relive your childhood. He didn't go to Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch and say, can I relive my childhood here? Because that would be abnormal. That's what a celebrity's life is like, which is all the indulgence of whatever you want. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is Michael Jackson, this excuse about childhood, it was just garbage. He knows it's garbage. And anyone with a couple synapses still firing knows that that was garbage.
So the number 2 defense has to do with Leaving Neverland and the train station. So after Leaving Neverland came out, fans pointed out that James Safechuck said he was molested upstairs in the train station by Michael Jackson. And they say it didn't exist because there wasn't a permit for it at that time. Was it 1993? Is that right?
Right.
What's the truth about the train station?
Okay, so this is what I found out. it was almost, let's see, it was probably about 2 weeks after Leaving Neverland had been released and everyone had seen it. It was, I don't know, maybe it was 2 or 3 weeks. Some reporter, and I don't know who it was. Do you remember who it was that came out with the permits?
I don't. I remember.
Okay.
It was like one of those rags in the UK picked it up. I know that.
Right. So somebody went on Twitter, and I remember it was some reporter. I just can't remember the person's name, but they came out with this whole thing about these permits, and it was in 1993, and everyone was saying, well, he couldn't have been molested or whatever. Now, I did send you an audio clip of Harrison Funk. I am going to be featuring this on my podcast, on the next one that I do. But essentially, this guy is a photographer, and he tells a story in this particular clip that I have about Michael Jackson telling him not to film the train station. And, of course, this incident sticks out in his mind, which is why he's retelling the incident. And he says, why? What's the big deal? And he said, well, I built it without a permit. Okay, well, if the permit was given in 93 that we know of, then obviously the train station was there before then. We also know that James Safechuck has pictures of the train station. That's what was included in the documentary. I'm satisfied. You know, James Safechuck is trying to retell something that happened to him over 20 years ago. Maybe he got a year wrong. Maybe he got a couple details wrong. That doesn't mean he wasn't molested, and that doesn't mean he wasn't molested in that train station. So,
and you were one of the few people who said that, and that was my instinct too. A lot of people who were supporters of Wade and James said he might have gotten that entire detail wrong, and were ready to just say that it was wrong right away. And my instinct or my feeling was that if he were the way he tells details in that documentary are so intense and believable. I just couldn't imagine him getting that wrong. You know what I mean?
No, I don't. I don't think he got any of it wrong. He may have gotten a time period wrong.
Sure.
He may have got that. I can understand.
Absolutely.
But was he violated in that train station? I absolutely believe he was, without a doubt. And now we know that it was before. You know, that train station was definitely there before 1993. Now, this Harrison Funk guy can back out and say all he wants to say, but if you listen to that clip, there's no ambiguity there. He's specifically talking about this train station being put up before any permit was given. I mean, he says it right there.
And also, the look at Michael Jackson's whole personality. Someone who's going to grab a baby with a placenta and run out of the hospital may not be the stickler for the rules. You know?
Oh, absolutely. He's not going to care about doing a permit. He probably didn't even know he needed a permit. Someone else probably came along and said something to him, or a lawyer said something to him. He probably didn't even know.
Another one of the myths is that Jordan Chandler, the first victim to speak up, is that right that he was the first victim to publicly accuse Michael Jackson of molestation? Publicly.
Yeah.
Okay. So, is that he's recanted, and he feels terrible about accusing Michael Jackson of such a thing, and he's in hiding because he feels so terrible?
No, this is something that was put out into the blogosphere probably 11, 12 years ago, maybe, and by all of my research, the only thing I can find is that its genesis was a blog that was poorly written, and it just sort of metastasized into the ether, and the story has changed, obviously. But no, there's no credible evidence to suggest that Jordan ever recanted, that he ever changed his story. There's just nothing there. He's not said anything, and he can't say anything because of the settlement. I don't know if it passes on to the estate or what it is, but my guess is even if Jordan could speak, he wouldn't want to.
What is your what do you think the public most misunderstands about Jordan Chandler's story?
Well, I mean, obviously the drawing, I mean, that most certainly matched. We have confirmation from Dworin.
Just so the audience knows what you're talking about. What's the drawing you're referring to?
Yeah, Jordy was asked to draw a depiction of Michael Jackson's penis, and clearly this matched. There's enough information there in the court records, as well as a confirmation from Bill Dworin, who was the lead detective on the case, and it matched. That's why he settled. Michael Jackson went on television back when this accusation first came about, and he actually paid to be on all the networks. I don't know if you remember this. It was kind of a big deal.
Is that the one where he said that it was the most nightmarish experience of my life? Is that?
Yeah. Okay. They took pictures of my buttocks and my thighs and my genitals. That one. Yes. So he, the fans don't like it when I do that, so that's why I did it.
It wasn't very good, though. I even remember at the time I had no understanding of child sexual abuse. I was very young, I was much younger than I am now. I didn't know what the truth was, but I remember seeing that and just maybe not even being conscious of the fact that I wasn't buying it, but just sort of like, And we were talking just before we started recording about how every time Michael Jackson speaks for himself, it seems to be a disaster.
It really is. It really is. Now, see, I wasn't as bright as you back then. I went ahead and believed him. But, yeah, he went on, and if you remember, he told everyone that he was going to fight to the end. He was going to fight these charges. He was not going to allow somebody to accuse him of hurting a child. He would never hurt a child, But then however long it was, all of a sudden, we're going to settle, and I'm going to pay him, $20 million.
And what I've heard repeatedly about Michael Jackson, people who knew him, who support him now, say that Michael Jackson had the personality type where he rather pay people off than fight a charge, even if it were untrue.
What are you even going to say to that? I mean, half these people don't even know Michael Jackson.
Well,
a good majority of them aren't even old enough to remember, Michael Jackson in his prime because they weren't even born yet.
Well, the thing that comes to mind is Paul McCartney. Now, Paul McCartney was recording with Michael Jackson, The Girl Is Mine, or Say, Say, Say. I don't know which one he was recording. But he said, I'm thinking, he just, they had an off moment. I'm thinking about buying some of the Beatles catalog. It's, going to be a really good investment. And Michael Jackson says nothing and goes behind Paul McCartney's back and just buys everything. Not just a few songs, everything, the entire Beatles catalog. And I'm not saying as a business person it wasn't a good move, but if you don't like to fight a charge and you rather pay people off because you care so little about money, it seems to go against that story, which shows someone who rather create friction in a friendship, which he had, and even a business relationship at that point with Paul McCartney, right?
Right.
And he was very interested in making money by getting the Beatles catalog. So you can't be both, right?
Right.
You can't be a people pleaser and not be confrontational or like tension or discord, and and
Yeah,
right.
he was all about money. That's not a secret.
And even Bob Jones, I highly recommend. I think it's called "The Boy Michael Jackson Paid Off." I'll put it link in the description because I had never heard any of these details of Jordan Chandler's story until I saw this documentary produced in the UK, I believe. I don't know for sure, but I think so.
Yeah, I believe it was a BBC production.
I had never heard any of those things. And one of the things I heard about Jordan Chandler's story is that he only came out with a story after his father, who was a dentist, gave him sodium pentothal.
Sodium amytal was the story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Amytal.
And it came out, that was an accusation that came out 8 months after the settlement, which is a little bizarre. It had no source. And the other problem with this story is that sodium amytal, there's no black market for it. So you have to get it through a prescription. You have to fill out this prescription in triplicate with the DEA. Nobody ever found such a prescription. There was another doctor that was there. He was the anesthesiologist. He did put Jordan out because they pulled the tooth, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the drug that was administered. Anyone who's ever been under or had, that anesthesia or whatever knows that as soon as they're done administering it, you wake up immediately after that. You're a little groggy, but there was nothing else that was given to him. The only thing that Evan Chandler said to Jordan was, "Did Michael Jackson touch your penis?" He said yes. He took him to the psychiatrist. That's all that happened. This idea that he fed him all these stories and gave him all this information, that would be very hard for Evan Chandler to do. And even if there was some drug administered, that's not really what that drug is for. It's for anxiety and for relaxing and things like that. It's not for planting memory. So it's just the problem with a lot of these lies and stories that the fans tell is that they don't even make sense. They're not even good lies.
Mm-hmm. And at the time I thought, well, Evan Chandler was being painted as such a villain. And they kept playing this clip of a tape where he says, I don't care, something about, what does he say he doesn't care about? I just want to destroy Michael Jackson. It's a clip.
Yeah, something along those lines. That was a cut-up audio that was done to make, him look bad. And, of course, the press ate it up, and they put it all over on the network. No, if you read the transcript, he's obviously angry. No one's going to deny that. He was very angry because his wife had cut off contact with him, and he knew something was going on, and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. And Michael had, essentially, from his perspective, had tore up his family, and he was very upset about it. So, yeah, he's going to get angry, as anyone would. And I think it's bizarre that people sit here clutching their pearls and acting as if they're so much better than everyone and pretending that they could even be in this man's shoes and expect him to be, professional and and so delicate with his language. Give me a break. Of course he's going to be angry. But a lot of that is taken out of context.
Interesting. And another point brought up about Evan Chandler was that he hired a very sleazy lawyer or a very tough lawyer. And he's even talking about in the tape saying, I'm going to get the toughest lawyer. But that seems understandable when you're going up against someone who has as much money and power as Michael Jackson. No?
Right. Oh, absolutely. He definitely wanted, in the tape he's talking with June's, I guess, new husband, but they had separated or whatever, but it was the next husband. And Dave, I believe his name was, and he's really hyping up this attorney, and he's talking about how, I wanted to get a nasty attorney, and that's exactly what he did in his mind. But we also have to, keep in mind that Evan, for all his flaws, because these parents were both very flawed, June especially, these were not, no one is going to sit here and argue that these parents were great parents. Definitely negligent, without a doubt. They let this adult man sleep in bed with their child. I mean, come on. They knew how it looked. They were not very thrilled with themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have Evan, who we find out is diagnosed with this rare disease that only affects Ashkenazi Jews. It's called gout, or I can't pronounce it. It's pronounced different than the way it's spelled. I apologize. But it is a rare disease that does not allow the shedding of cells. So not only is the skin not shedding, the cells inside of our bodies, like our organs and stuff, those are not shedding either. And we have no idea how this could have affected his brain, his mentality. He waited too long to be diagnosed so that doctors could really do anything for him. And this, of course, culminated into him being in a sort of paralyzed state at the end of his life. And ultimately, that's why he did take his life. A lot of the fans like to say he killed himself because of this guilt and all this other stuff. No, his medicine stopped working, and he couldn't take it anymore. And yes, Jordan was living with him for 4 years prior to that. So, yes, they had a falling out, but they came back together.
There's one part of Michael Jackson that we saw was the sort of fragile Michael Jackson in the second, the trial with Gavin Arvizo. And he came to trial in his pajamas, looking as white as a ghost and very drugged out. Now, Wade-Robson talks about visiting with Michael Jackson the night before he testified, and Michael Jackson getting blind drunk and being so out of it he couldn't attend to his children. Do you think any of that was performative to look more vulnerable, like someone who needed to be protected?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, the thing about Michael Jackson we have to remember is, just in people in general, really, some of people like this, they play out this victim narrative, right? But do they know they're really playing it out, or is it just something that happens because of their personality flaws and how they are? Michael Jackson always played the role of a victim every chance he could. He was always talking about everyone's after him, people are after me, I'm just this, poor me, it's everyone else's fault. But was he consciously aware that that's what he was doing? I don't know. I mean, that he really would make a great case study for a psychology student out there, you know?
Right, and what's so interesting is that the tagline is that the supporters' tagline is that people lie, facts don't.
Yeah, facts don't lie, people do.
Thank you.
And I
Thank you
and
for
I
the
say,
correction.
I say facts don't lie, pedophiles lie.
But let's talk about some of Michael Jackson's. What I was going to ask you before we were recording was, do you think Michael Jackson put false stories out there, like he wanted a white child to play him in the movie, so he could say, look at how many lies there are in the press about me, so that these claims of abuse would just be one more of these kind of stories?
Oh, yeah, we know that he put out a lot of fake stories. So whether it was that hyperbaric chamber or whatever, or the buying the elephant, what was the Elephant Man bones or whatever,
yes.
That story was fake. I've heard about the white child wanting the white child to play him. I've heard that one before too. But most all of these stories ended up being fed to the media, well, through the tabloids by Michael Jackson himself. And then, of course, he would later blame them for attacking him. So he gets a win-win. He gets the attention, and then on the back half, he gets to claim victimhood.
And what was the video he made? I don't know if you'll remember this, where he put headlines of himself buying the Elephant Man bones in the video. Like, look at me such a victim, dealing with the horrible press and all these lies. Do you remember that video?
I don't remember that one.
Okay.
I'm trying to... It sounds really, really familiar. It sounds really familiar, but I don't remember it well enough to comment.
Okay, if you remember, if anyone remembers what that video, which video that was, just put it in the comment section, please. It's just kind of interesting. And he also told Oprah that he only had one or two nose jobs?
2 nose jobs.
That was all the plastic surgery he ever had.
That's all he ever had, you guys.
It's like, are you going to believe me or your lying eyes? With a dimple in the chin, the totally transformed face, tattooed eyeliner.
I just aged. That's what happened to my face.
And another... It's amazing, right? Another point brought up... I'm sorry to laugh. It's just... it really is outrageous.
It's so ridiculous. He went from a good-looking black man to an ugly old white woman.
And do you think any of his getting plastic surgery so that he wouldn't look like a creepy middle-aged man, to kind of look womanly and not dangerous,
Well, everything I've heard is he attributes these changes and stuff to his hatred of his father, and he did not want to look at all like his father. And apparently his father would pick on him for having a big nose. So he was very sensitive about that particular part of his facial structure. So that's basically where that comes from. But it's obviously a body dysmorphia thing. I mean, I don't know if you knew how small he was. He weighed like 100 pounds in his 30s. He was a very unsightly weight for a good part of the late 80s and early 90s especially. He was vegan. He didn't eat any meat or dairy from what I understand. So he just did not take very good care of himself in general. And not that there's anything wrong with being vegan, but there's healthy ways of being vegan, and then there's unhealthy ways of being vegan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, later on you add to that the drug use and alcohol and things like that. So,
and that brings up a point. There's about the whole Michael Jackson enterprise. I mean, part of what wade-robson and James Sifechuk are talking about is how Michael Jackson's pedophilia was enabled by the people around him. What did his staff see? Who has spoken out? And what does it say in the lawsuit?
Okay, so let's see. We've got several people in the staff. There was one... I don't know if I wrote everyone's name down. I apologize. There was one woman in particular that actually skipped the country. And she was... Gosh, I can't remember. I thought I wrote her name down. I apologize.
It's okay.
But she left Stacos or something. Do you know who I'm talking about?
No.
She had a weird name. She basically worked herself up all the way to the top position. And she actually told that Francia, you've got a young boy, don't bring him here. And
Francia was Michael Jackson's personal
Jason
maid.
Francia's mother, yeah. The other boy who ended up getting paid about $2.5 million from Michael. So she was actually warned by this woman not to bring anybody. And then when the, trial came down, they were supposed to do depositions and stuff like that, she ended up skipping the country altogether and visiting her family somewhere else. But, get this, she was getting payments because they had other staff flat out say whenever this woman called and wanted money, she'd want $10,000 here, $20,000 here, they were told to give it. So obviously, they wanted to shut her up and keep her shut up. For how long? I don't know. No one knows how long that went on for. There's been bodyguards. There were the Havenhurst Five that have come forward, and then you have the Neverland Five that came forward, as well as some additional employees who talked about, what they were asked to do. And basically, you'd have these boys dropped off at the guardhouse, for instance, while they waited for Michael to get home. And then they would sneak them up because when Michael was at Havenhurst, he didn't want his parents knowing anything, okay? And he would have them sneak these boys in his room for days on end.
And Francia, before she testified, she had a bicycle accident, which was much talked about among the other staff because she was also threatened and told that she can be made to disappear. And she describes a phone call where Michael Jackson asks her, "What did you see? What do you know?" over and over again. And so she was threatened, and the other staff didn't feel like her bicycle accident right before she was set to testify, although she still went on and testified, was an accident.
Yeah. There was another incident as well. I believe it was, I want to say it was for the Neverland Five. Mm-hmm. Their attorney was attacked at some point, and it was apparently the same tan vehicle that may have been involved with Francia's accident. So just little weird things that you can't prove, but right. It's all a little bit too coincidental, if you know what I mean.
And Michael Jackson hired one of the most disreputable people in Hollywood now, Pellicano, who was a private investigator known to allegedly run people off the road. He just got out of prison now for having an arsenal, for having surveillance equipment that you needed to decode in elaborate ways. Pellicano has been quoted as saying the worst thing Michael Jackson did to children wasn't molesting them. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. What do you think he meant by that?
That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe that's why Michael Jackson brought up that Jack the Ripper comment.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. They asked him...
Maybe he killed some kids. I don't, who knows? But then again, you have to remember he is he does have a flair for the dramatic. So, will he ever talk? I mean, that's what it really boils down to, is show us what you got. Stop flapping your gums already.
I agree. And it's the most curious comment. Because the only thing worse than molestation in my mind is torture or murder, maybe? I mean, that's where my mind goes. And when Michael Jackson was asked whether he would molest a child or he was guilty, he said, "I would never molest a child." You just said, "I'm not Jack the Ripper." Oh, no, it was in context of whether he would, it's okay to sleep with a child. He goes, it's not okay if you're a pedophile, which I'm not, if you're Jack the Ripper. And you had an interesting take on Jack the Ripper. Why did he bring up Jack the Ripper if he's not a murderer, obviously, you know?
I don't know. No one was talking about killing prostitutes, Michael. You know, what is that all about? The other one I thought was always funny is he sat down with Diane Sawyer after he married Lisa Marie Presley.
There's another interview in Marriage No One Bought, yes?
Yeah, there's been a few interviews. I'm trying to remember which one it was now. Maybe it wasn't the Diane Sawyer one. But he said, because they asked him about why he settled, right?
Uh-huh.
And he says, well, I settled because I didn't want this drawn-out thing. I didn't want it to be like O.J. Well, O.J. happened after, number one, okay? And number two, even when you did go to trial in 2005, there was only a 2-year difference. It wasn't this spread out 7 years that he was talking about. I always found that comment really, really weird, right? So I'm reading Diane Diamond's book, and it turns out, and I didn't remember this because I read the court documents back in 2006 or whatever, but I didn't remember this. She had pulled out a motion from the defense. They wanted to delay a trial for 6 years because they wanted to basically wait until the statute of limitations ran out. So that's where that whole, I'd have to wait 6 or 7 years, that's where that came from. It was his own attorney trying to delay a trial so that the statute of limitations ran out, which I just always found to be absurd.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
And Wade Robson's and James Safechuck's lawsuit had been dismissed because of the statute of limitations. So
right.
It obviously is something that works in pedophiles' favor.
Right, exactly. No, that's what they rely on. Obviously, the laws need to be changed here, and I think that's the bigger issue that we need to, that why I talk about it, and I'm sure that's why you talk about it, is we have a better understanding of victims of pedophilia, and that it does take them an average of 20 years to come forward, sometimes longer, sometimes never. But they need to be able to hear their voices. And I've always said, if they hadn't sued, these people would be criticizing them of not suing, right? They'd say, well, if I were molested, I'd at least sue. They can't win for losing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, they want to go on record, and of course they want to say anything. And the other important part of the important aspect of them coming forward, in my view, is when other people come forward, they will already have their testimonies on record with the court. And I think that might help. And hopefully, maybe one day we can get some laws changed.
Just quickly, you do a great episode about Brandy Jackson. Who is Brandy Jackson? And why has she been giving interviews?
Well, I guess she's Michael Jackson's niece, I guess. And according to her, she dated Wade for a number of years, 7, 8 years, I guess. And now she wants to come forward and tell her story of how wonderful her uncle was, along with her cousin there, Taj. So I really don't quite understand her. Her story doesn't make sense. But the Jackson fans love her.
Yeah, you point out that her story doesn't make sense at all, that she claims that she started dating Wade when she was 9. Is that right? Something really young?
Well, she
10?
said she said she was 9 when she met him, okay? She has this, I don't know, this story that I suppose I want to try and be charitable as I can, okay?
Okay.
So let's say they dated around the age of 10 or 11 for 8 years. That would make her 18 or 19 years old, okay? But then the tale of her story is that Wade cheated on her with Britney Spears, and that's what ended their relationship. But no matter how you add it, she seems to be a few years off from that date, right? And Wade publicly dated another woman named Mady. I'm not terribly familiar with her, but she's a dancer. And he publicly dated her before anything happened with him in Brittany, which would be 2002. So it was 2001 that he dated this other woman. So I don't see how her story adds up, because now you have another girlfriend in the middle, and that was somebody he publicly dated. It wasn't somebody that was, hidden or in the background.
And she's not being given any critical questions or hard questions at all in the interviews I've heard with her.
No, the one interview that I actually commented on is about the hardest they've ever come after her. And you could tell that they weren't really buying her story.
And one of her points seems to be that Wade-Robson didn't have enough time with Michael Jackson for Michael Jackson to sexually abuse him.
Right, that's her claim. And this is not true at all. Wade was across the street from the Century City, the hideout or whatever that Michael Jackson had. Mm-hmm. And there's testimony of the security guard. They saw Wade crossing the street at night, okay, by himself, by the way, crossing the street by himself, going to Michael Jackson's, apartment there, and then going back in the morning. So I don't know how, as you said, there's no questioning of her. Is she trying to say she spent the night? Is that what she's trying to say? I don't know. It would be interesting if Wade said something, but I'm just wondering if Wade's letting her have as much rope as she'd like.
Yeah, it's a very interesting. There's sort of a lot of unspoken things, I think, at least in my view, that she's trying to point out that he's sort of too heterosexual to be molested in some way.
Right. It's very bizarre. Like, I would know because I was with him. I'm sorry, the data does not show that. There are people who are abused and people around them don't know. This is not uncommon.
Exactly. So you say that Michael Jackson was a sociopath. Why do you say that?
Yeah. Okay, I've got 3 reasons with sociopaths. Number 1 are dead eyes. You can take any sociopath, and if you want reference, I recommend Jodi Arias, Scott Peterson, Amanda Knox, Stephen Avery. Dead eyes, okay? They all have dead eyes. If you look at his photos, especially, or even when he's doing an interview, it's just this creepy, soulless look that is just unmistakable among sociopaths. But more to the point, the psychology, there's 2 things that sociopaths are always worried about: their image and money. And then everything else is sort of secondary or tertiary problems with sociopathy. But Michael Jackson was always obsessed with image, and he was always obsessed with money. And he would step on anybody along the way. And then if you look into the relationships with the children especially, how tragic would it be for you to be a child and you don't know any better, and you're in this relationship with someone that you love and admire and adore, and you think that this is special, and he's telling you this is special, and then one day you get a little bit older and you grow a little bit taller, and then there's a new boy and you're left out in the cold, and that's it. He just moves on to the next kid. That's got to be heartbreaking. How do you make sense of that? Who does that to anybody, right?
Especially
only somebody who's cold.
Right. It's true.
Only somebody who's cold could honestly do that. And that's a problem with pedophilia in general. Pedophiles are only attracted to a certain type of person, a child in this case. And once they outgrow that, they move on to something else. That's not a healthy love. If you actually love somebody, you want to grow old with them, right? You want to be with them forever. You want to see their lines and wrinkles and take care of them and change their bedpans when they get older. I mean, that's what love is. But this is not love. This is abuse. And it's psychological as well as sexual. It goes beyond just the sexual stuff. It is a huge psychological thing.
And the things they found in that, I guess it was the storage lock. Was that the storage locker with the animal abuse and the pornography and just, it was really disturbing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely abused animals. And I believe Jane, oh God, what's the ape lady? Jane Goodart, is that her name?
Yes, Jane,
Yeah, very famous woman. She ended up making some comments about the way Bubbles was treated. And there are some disturbing stories about Bubbles. Now, these are all secondary stories. No one's testified to them. I don't know how, I can't speak to their veracity by any means. But there are a few stories of people who were concerned about Bubbles. And yes, I'm talking about what you think I'm talking about.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tuesday, thank you so much for
Thank you.
for doing this interview. I've learned so much, and definitely check out Tuesday's podcast if you haven't already. It's on Podbeam, theelephantlounge.org, and it's also on YouTube. Anywhere else?
No, that's about it. I got kicked off Twitter, so.
And I'm shadow banned, so between the two of us, don't look for us on Twitter. If you don't already follow me, you won't be able to find me, and you won't be able to find Tuesday at all until, I guess, they let you back in.
Yeah, so. I did an appeal, but, what are you going to do? It's probably best I stay off,
Okay, thanks so much.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it.